Now, I'm not really a news channel, but every now and then a news cycle comes along that makes you feel like you need to smoke after, and this has really been one of those months. So, this isn't everything, but here's a few of my favorite bits from the last few weeks. Obviously, the big news is Godzilla and Kong Supernova was announced with an ominous teaser and a phone number that you can call to report Titan sightings. And now, we'll watch the internet tear itself apart with Space Godzilla and Gigan theories, but I just hope we get Space Doug and Mecha Giant Octopus. We got a special video celebrating Godzilla's history in Asia that gave us a cool twist on the -1 design, with spiky ankles, an updated roar, and green atomic breath. So, in my headcanon, the green atomic breath obviously means this Godzilla is somehow tied to Godzilla Jr. from the Godzilla the Series cartoon. Godzilla wore the Venom symbiote in Marvel's Godzilla vs. Spider-Man, and it was like a million DeviantArt accounts cried out in terror and were suddenly silenced. So this year, Godzilla has or will square off with or team up with the Fantastic Four, the Avengers, Spider-Man, Hulk, the Power Rangers, the Justice League, Suicide Squad, and of course, the Great Gatsby. Keeping with comics, the new Godzilla manga, Godzilla Galaxy Odyssey, is right around the corner, and Godzilla's new design looks like Kiryu Saga Godzilla mixed with Ultima, mixed with some funky dorsal plates, and I am all about that. Gotengo makes a return, and it seems like Godzilla will be squaring off against a mysterious new kaiju. I'm actually really looking forward to this. Now I just have to figure out how I'm actually going to be able to read it. So the manga drops on May 27th, so I assume Bandai will announce a figure on the 28th, and then they'll announce 5 Godzilla Store repaint exclusives on the 29th, and then he'll be announced for Battle Line on the 30th, where he will probably take Ryo's place at the top of the meta. Well, there you have it. What a month it's been so far. Well, till next time. Once upon a time, Pluto was still a planet and Gary Sharon was in Van Halen, and we used to have to browse TVGuide for the off chance that we would find a listing for a Godzilla movie. Well, I got a little nostalgic these times, and I decided to visit the old archive, we'll say, and see what I could find. I should note, all of these clippings are from the 70s to the early 90s. Kicking things off with Godzilla vs. Monster Zero, poor King Ghidorah doesn't even get mentioned, and it only got 1 star. Meanwhile, The Sandlot, which is a damn fine movie, don't get me wrong, gets 2 stars. What's going on here, TV Guide? Now, Godzilla vs. Biollante, which I don't ever remember seeing on TV, got 2 stars, which means it's just as good as The Sandlot, but it's not quite Grease. The Gigantus the Fire Monster version of Godzilla Raids Again is also a Sandlot caliber movie, according to TV Guide. Now, would you rather watch Bob Costas or Godzilla vs. Megalon, where the world hangs in the balance and Godzilla battles a mysterious clawed creature? Sorry, Bobby, Jet Jaguar wins this round. Every TV guide I found from 1980 seemed to just have listings for the Hanna-Barbera Godzilla cartoon paired with the Harlem Globetrotters cartoon. I wasn't born yet, but that would have been my favorite hour of TV for sure. But then I found this article from the 90s talking about the Green Ranger becoming the White Ranger, and Superhuman Samurai Cyber Squad is catching strays for being quote-unquote super bad. Aw, I just love that show. I found this interesting listing for Godzilla's Revenge from 1976, which praises the top-notch special effects, and then proceeds to list the release year and the cast for Son of Godzilla. But hey, that's okay. Now there's no star rating here, but any movie where Manila gets punched in the face is easily twice as good as The Sandlot in my book. Instant 5 stars. Well, this was fun, and I would like to do another one of these sometime. So, till then. It's only April of 2025, and we already have a contender for Figure of the Year with Hiya Shimo Exquisite Basic Figure. I'll never understand the marketing around why they call the line basic, because when I think basic, I think North Face jackets and figures with little paint, low detail, and little articulation, and this figure is anything but that. So I wouldn't consider myself an expert figure reviewer, and I don't know all the fancy terms, but I hope you'll trust my layman's analysis when I say, this figure is sick, kid. The detail, the articulation, the sheer size, it's all ridiculously awesome. The way they mixed in subtle shades of pink, purple, and blues across the white paint look amazing in hand. I've seen a few reviews where some figures have paint chips on the nails, but fortunately my figure is free of any notable scuffs and chips. Some of the joints were a little stiff on mine, but nothing major. Was Shimo behind schedule? Yes. But was she worth the wait? 100%. Will I try to pose this figure in ways that copy the goofy poses my cats do? Also yes. So I can't recommend this one enough. If you're on the fence, you should absolutely try to get this figure. Good on you, Hiya. Fine work. Till next time. Someone once described this figure to me as the Shin Godzilla that looks like they just realized they left the stove on. Playmates' first Shin Godzilla figure was part of their early waves of releases that gave us cosmic horrors like Mouthguard Space Godzilla, but then a randomly awesome Final Wars Gagan. But this Shin Godzilla is the most infamous figure of the early rocky start for Playmates. First, the good. Well, the body isn't bad, even though the red paint is pretty minimal. Tail looks good, I guess. But then, well, Shin's got a head shaped like needle-nose pliers and an expression that looks like a laughing Muppet. So what the hell went wrong here? So everyone quickly noticed that the figure bears a striking resemblance to NECA's Shin Godzilla figure, particularly in the legs, arms, very similar dorsal plates, and the awkward head shape. So as Playmates were using molds? After all, several of their figures look like reworks of Bandai and Jakks figures. Well, back in 2020, Toho Kingdom interviewed Playmates' vice president of marketing and asked them straight up. They were a little coy, claiming that they'd been using their own proprietary molds since their original deal with Bandai ended. Eventually, Playmates took a second crack at Shin and produced a pretty decent toy. Generally speaking, I'd say Playmates has come a long way from their days of dubious sculpts, where it felt like every figure was in a walking pose because I guess they all had some place to be. But that doesn't change the fact that they gave us this first ballot Hall of Famer of a figure. Till next time. Back in the ancient times of 2021, Toho announced Godzilla's next foray into mobile gaming with Run Godzilla, Godzilla Battleline, and today's topic, Godzilla Destruction. Now, when all three games dropped, I naively thought that Destruction was going to be the breakout game and have a long, successful run. Instead, the game lasted less than a year, starting its run in April of 2021 and shutting down the following January. Whoops. So just what was this game that burned the brightest but also the fastest? Developed by prolific mobile and blockchain game developers Noble L, you controlled Godzilla and several other kaiju and destroyed cities and battled enemies through a mechanic that saw Godzilla attack whenever he was standing still. The idea was that you had to navigate Godzilla outside of your opponent's line of attack, but be in position to counterattack safely. It was pretty simple. I mean, you basically played the entire game just using your thumb, but it was also addictive, and I personally thought it was an effective way to bring Godzilla to a mobile game. Now, did it have microtransactions? Of course. It's a mobile game. But I don't recall them being that obnoxious, and I played the game fairly casually for its brief run and never felt like I was hitting a wall. The game initially launched with Godzilla Rodan, Mothra, Batra, and King Ghidorah being unlockable, with several more kaiju planned, including King Kong apparently, but ultimately were never released. Admittedly, my time of destruction waned as Battleline took over my mobile gaming life, but I can confidently say that for a brief period of time Destruction, you were my favorite of the mobile trio. So long, old friend. We hardly knew you. It seems like Bagan is all the rage lately. He's got new figures, a role in Gojiban, and most prestigious of all, he's a character in Battleline. You could say we're living in a real Bagan-sance. You know, like Renaissance? Never mind, whatever. Bagan is probably one of the biggest curiosities in the Toho universe, the kaiju embodiment of always the bridesmaid but never the bride. Bagan has almost 10 abandoned films on his anti-resume, dating all the way back to the 1980s, where he was initially this multi-form nightmare-fuel monstrosity. Now, Bagan was frequently considered for Godzilla-related projects in the 90s, most famously for an abandoned Mothra movie whose storyboards were covered in fanzines and spread across the net in the 90s. But to me, Bagan has always been a demon of my video game youth. He's the imposing final boss of Super Godzilla, who always made my palms sweaty as I tried to survive his brutal onslaught just long enough to morph into Super Godzilla, and even then it was still a brutal fight. John Cena might have the 5 moves of doom, but Bagan's got the phone book of pain. From shoulder tackles to slashing attacks, beam attacks, and raining diamonds on your head, everything Bagan did hurt, and it hurt a lot, and many a run came to an exhausting and disappointing end. Not long ago, people would often say that it's ridiculous that Boba Fett has the following that he did, when he barely did anything in his film appearances. Well, Bagan doesn't even have an actual movie to his credit, and he's been enduring for over 40 years. So it's nice to see one of my childhood video game nemeses finally get his well-deserved time to shine. Could his big film break finally be around the corner? Only time will tell. In the 90s and 2000s, Titanosaurus fever swept the fandom. He often ranked high in fan polls, and he was like that cool underground band you listened to while King Ghidorah was Metallica with short hair. But just what made the dinosaur with the elephant roar so endearing? Well, Terror of Mechagodzilla benefited from being both a readily accessible and a fan-favorite film at a time where the lighter side of Godzilla's adventures weren't held in the highest regard. Titanosaurus is a grounded and realistic character, well, about as realistic as any of this can really be, and he stood apart from the more outlandish and surreal kaiju at the time like Gigan and Megalon. Plus, his tragic backstory of being a gentle dinosaur, mind-controlled into doing bad, sets him apart from his evil kaiju colleagues, and it really pours on the feels. But it could also just be as simple as that he's a brightly colored dinosaur that trades beams for fist and tail fans, and brawls with Godzilla in some of the best fight scenes of the Showa series. Between the look, the fighting skills, and the unique backstory, it's no wonder the Big T carved out a space in so many fans' hearts. Now, in my headcanon, I want to believe Titanosaurus recovered in the ocean because nobody who falls in the ocean in a Showa Godzilla movie ever really stays dead, and I hope he's just living peacefully tucked away. However, Tower of Mechagodzilla's screenwriter, Yukiko Takayama, has a slightly darker, albeit unofficial headcanon that involves Titanosaurus becoming a cyborg and leading a robot revolt. But that's a story for another time. But now, if you'll excuse me, I'm gonna go dust off my Wii and play Godzilla Unleashed and run a campaign using Big T himself. Those no good Vortak are never gonna know it hit them. With IDW announcing their own unique take on Godzilla, I thought it'd be fun to look back at when Dark Horse Comics wove their own unique Godzilla tale. Released back in 1987 for a whole $1.50 and later purchased by me for 50 cents in a local comic shop, Dark Horse's Godzilla King of the Monsters special is a uniquely dark and semi-horror take on the Big G. Written by prolific Dark Horse author and executive Randy Stradley, this take on Godzilla sees the King of the Monsters awoken by the discovery of a mysterious slab which attracts a slew of kaiju, many of which are stand-ins for other famous Toho monsters. While the slab is described as being radioactive, there are no overt connections with radiation to Godzilla's origin. Instead, he and the other kaiju are centuries-old monsters that wake up throughout time to wreak havoc. The story, which ends up being the basis for Dark Horse's ongoing comic years later, is told primarily through flashbacks by Noriko Yoshiwara, who recounts losing her parents during Godzilla's attack. While the story is an effective horror take on Godzilla, the big highlight is the artwork by longtime horror artists Steve Bissette and Ron Randall. Godzilla's design is creepy and unnatural looking, and the other kaiju look like twisted versions of their Toho cousins, and the original release being in black and white only heightens the grim nature of the tale. Actually, now that I think about it, Godzilla kinda looks like a warped version of that Polish Godzilla poster. Anyway, I should probably also mention that Alan Moore contributes a rather unique, we'll say, Godzilla illustration in the bonus section of the original comic. So in the end, I've always enjoyed this dark tale, and I give it the slick seal of approval. Till next time. In the 90s, Dark Horse had all the cool licenses. They had Star Wars, they had Godzilla, and they even had Gamera. In 1996, Dark Horse published a 4-issue Gamera miniseries that's a rather unique comic anomaly. The comic is actually a direct sequel to 1995's Gamera Guardian of the Universe, a movie that nobody in the US would have seen at this point unless they were sliding down the slippery slope of VHS bootlegs like I was. Fortunately, the first issue contains a synopsis and a few screenshots from the movie to catch the reader up. The story itself is a lovely 90s throwback, back when Baja Blast wasn't even a twinkle in Surge Soda's eye yet. The first issue's tone is mostly in line with Guardian of the Universe, but one quick left turn later and we get a story featuring mad scientist, an alien named Freena that first speaks in an alien language that you have to manually translate, and then later switches to 90s slang, all while Varas is trying to mind control the whole world. It's silly fun, and we even get the return of Asagi and Mayumi. The kaiju art looks great, and the battles are nice and fiery, to say the least, and I feel like Gamera Rebirth may have actually taken some inspiration from some panels here. The human characters look good as well. They all have that 90s everyone is in great shape with 0% body fat look, but more like Mark Bagley and less like Rob Liefeld. My only real complaint? Dark Horse had the licenses to Godzilla and Gamera at the same time and we never got a crossover. As Freena would say, what a bummer, dude. Well, till next time. On this channel, I like exploring the obscure and the kind of weird. So Agon the Atomic Dragon, or Phantom Monster Agon, is kind of right up this channel's alley. Developed by Nippon Denpa Eiga with help from prolific Toho writer Shinichi Segazawa, Agon infamously started his career against a nearly invincible foe, Toho's legal department. Originally intended to air as a TV miniseries in 1964, the one-two punch of Toho the legal-headed monster threatening to sue over Agon's similarities to Godzilla, and a critical sponsor dropping out, Agon remained a phantom until January of 1968. So what was all the fuss about? Well, what we got was two tonally different story arcs by two different scriptwriters, divided over 4 episodes, but still ultimately amounting to a fairly run of the mill curiosity. The show does do some things well, though. Agon's suit is well done for what it is, and the opening that depicts Agon attacking a city that he never actually visits in the actual series has a nice creepy vibe when he fires his flamethrower breath in slow motion. Also, the second story arc is a unique, albeit slow-moving mix of gangsters with stolen drugs, clashing with reporters, detectives, and scientists, while Agon spends most of the show treating a boat like a chew toy till the extremely random ending. But Agon's run didn't end there, intrepid listener. He would get a little bit of a facelift, and he would appear on Ambassador Magma as both the dinosaur and the volcano monster Aaron, which would even get him some figures. We all know, once you get that merch deal, you've cemented your place in history. So good on you, Agon.